This is Dwight Eisenhower, Part 1. Dwight Eisenhower, Part 1. All right, President Eisenhower, we call him Ike, would be our next president, okay, after Truman. We'll talk about that in a second. Here's his caricature page, Kiss the Cook. You can see this. He's responsible for our interstate, U.S. interstate, which is very essential for shipping and things like that. Travel, it's nice to be able to jump on 75 and be in Florida in about 10 hours or 12 hours. And but it's also built for military reasons. Okay, if you ever notice or take a look at the Google map, for every so many miles there's a long straightaway, and that's, God forbid we ever need to use it for national security reasons. But if we do, it'll be used as an airstrip. And that's the real purpose behind the interstate. He was born in 1890 in Texas. Grew up in Abilene, Kansas. Okay, actually kind of grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. Didn't have a lot of money. Couldn't afford to go to college. He was very athletic, as we're going to see. But he couldn't afford to go to college, so he joined the military, and he'll go to West Point. While he was there, he actually was a member of the football team and played against Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe is possibly the greatest athlete ever. Was in the Olympics, played pro baseball and football. And he actually got tackled by Jim Thorpe and wrenched his knee and later broke his leg, and would never play football again. And he would constantly say that was his biggest disappointment. 1915, Ike graduates from West Point and was sent off to Fort Sam Houston in Texas. 1916, he marries Mammy, and he was 26, she was 19 when they got married. There they are. World War II. He led invasions of North Africa, Sicily, the Italian mainland, D-Day in France, and will actually accept the German surrender. We'll know that he'll be named the Supreme Allied Commander as well. And post-World War II, he was the Chief of Staff. He oversees the demobilization of American forces, which is a big job. It's not like you can just let all the troops just go home at once like they did in World War I. They learned their lesson. So they had some type of point system, which was determined by how long you've been there, what kind of action you saw, and you'd be let go home in that manner. So it wouldn't just send everybody home at once. There was a lot of pressure to become president. He said no, he didn't want anything to do with it. Both Democrats and Republicans wanted him because he was so popular after the war. I Like Ike was heard all over America. Truman even asked him to run. And Ike says, it's best for professional soldiers to stay out of politics. But we'll see, that'll change. In 1948, he becomes the Columbia University president. Many believe that he did this so he would get some executive experience. Although I would say being the leader of the Supreme Allied forces would be plenty of experience. In 1950, he's called back to duty, and Truman recalls him to create the military forces for NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that is our side of the Cold War. In 1952, he decides to run for president. He accepts the presidential nomination from the Republican Party. Future President Richard, I thought I had a picture there. There he is. Future President Richard Nixon will be his running mate, and Nixon was a senator from California. The platform was to get rid of all the corruption in Washington and rid the government of any communist infiltration. And it's been apparent that there are quite a few leaks in our government. So that's what they're going to run on. Their opponents are Adlai Stevenson. His father was vice president for Grover Cleveland. He's a Democrat, also known as a egghead, meaning very intellectual. In fact, so intellectual that Ike refused to have a debate with him, which would be unheard of today. But Ike didn't do it. He felt that he would look like a fool. And then John Sparkman will be his running mate from Alabama. Now, during this election, during the campaign, there was an embarrassing moment. There was a charge that Nixon had a little corruption going on in his own life, that he accepted money from a businessman to finance his career, his political career. Nixon declares innocent and cries on national TV. And this led to the famous Checkers speech. Checkers speech, and we'll see that later. The dog, his family dog, was named Checkers, and it was received as a gift. It was a little Cocker Spaniel, black and white. And during this time, Nixon gives a speech explaining, that he did accept a gift. It was a gift of a dog. That was it. There wasn't any money. And that kind of got him some notoriety and made him become a household name. And also at the same time, Ike has an embarrassing moment where he's trying to give a nationwide speech, and he thinks he's off in the air, and he curses on air, talking to the teleprompter who's not holding up his signs. So, some interesting things. But Ike wins anyway, and you can see pretty easily. Very, very popular. Ike promises, we talked about the Eisenhower promise to bring the war to an end, and he wins by more than 6 million votes and will carry that promise out. Goes to Korea, and the war ends in 5 months. However, the war was really coming to an end already. So now he's going to continue the Truman Doctrine, contain communism, stop the spread of communism. His Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, is a very hard-line anti-communist, and we'll see he takes us to the brink. They actually call it they called him the master of brinksmanship, because he takes us to the brink of war quite a few times during this time. And he's just not going to bend when it comes to communism. And that's basically going to be our foreign policy from here on out. In April of 1954, in the Geneva Conference, which included Communist China at the time, Vietnam will be split at the 17th parallel. Okay, here's Vietnam. We'll hear more about that, obviously, later. So they will be split at the 17th parallel, kind of following that Korean model. Cambodia will be given its independence. It was formerly part of this area. Okay, so now we're going to have some issues here. Communist up here, Democratic down here. So hopefully we can avoid a conflict. You know I'm saying that with tongue in cheek. SEATO is formed. SEATO is the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, and it's very similar to NATO, only obviously with these countries involved. It is a mutual defense pact, but it doesn't have troops like NATO does. That's the biggest difference between SEATO and NATO. NATO had a standing army. Here are the countries involved, and you can see it's kind of a little bit odd. The United States, France, New Zealand, Australia, Pakistan, the Philippines, the UK, and Thailand. So get a little bit of everything in SEATO. But that was formed to hopefully stop the spread of communism in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia. In 1955, Ike had a moderate heart attack. He spent 7 weeks in the hospital. Spent the next 5 weeks at his farm in Gettysburg. He continued to meet with staff and other cabinet members. He did not hand over his power to Richard Nixon, but Richard Nixon would then basically take the president's role in many public events. And this is what gets Richard Nixon a lot of publicity during this time. Makes his name very well known. And that's going to obviously help Nixon later. 1956, Ike runs again. The doctors gave him the okay. He gets a clean bill of health, and he runs. Nixon will be his vice president again, even though there was some opposition to Nixon within the party. The Democrats will see Adlai Stevens once again, this time with Estes Kefauver from Tennessee. And you've never heard of those guys because they lost. Ike wins again, very easily. JFK was actually trying to get this nomination, but it didn't work. They win in a landslide. In October 1956, right before the election, in Poland, some anti-Russian uprisings begin, or they've really been going on since June. The new leader now is Nikita Khrushchev. I think I got a picture here of Nikita. There he is. There's Nikita Khrushchev, and we'll talk a lot about him for a little bit. But he's going to basically send troops to the Polish border. Okay? And that's kind of their signal, like, okay, yeah, you had your fun, but you better stop or we're coming in. In Hungary, we see the same thing, okay? Anti-Russian uprisings in Hungary as well. They call themselves the freedom fighters. They thought this was more dangerous than the Polish situation. In Poland, they just sat by the border and just kind of said, here we go. But in Hungary, they're going to send the troops in, and they're going to squash these freedom fighters. Okay? Nikita Khrushchev is not going to mess around. He thought it was more dangerous in Hungary, and the freedom fighters prove that because they fight back. 32,000 freedom fighters were killed in this rebellion alone. And they made it as Man of the Year. Hungarian freedom fighter. You can see the Hungarian flag. They ripped out that communist symbol that was in it. In October 28th, the Soviets pull out of Hungary, and it looks like the freedom fighters had won. Not so fast. Not so fast. November 4th, they send in with a heavy assault and basically just wasted the revolution. Hungary pleads to the world, but we're going to contain communism. We're not going to attack it. That would start World War III. So, our options were basically a nuclear war or nothing. Okay, that was in their sphere of influence. And the super countries had those influences over smaller countries, and it was kind of agreed upon that you can't do that. If you cross the line, you were risking war. All right, that is where we will stop. Stay classy, Vandalia.